to Art in the Raw. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to artist Zac Scheinbaum. We're going to talk to Zac about his life as a creative person and how he's made a living as an artist. And that includes everything from works on paper and canvases to tattooing and even publishing books. If this is your first time watching, you might be wondering who I am. That's fair. In a nutshell, I have been involved in some sort of art basically my entire life. But about 20 years ago, I made the decision to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico to go to art school and further immerse myself in the art scene. And I've been now working in the professional gallery world for a little over 15 years now. And if you'd like to know more, take a look at the description. There's a link to an interview that I did for Lens Scratch. But in the meantime, I'm excited to introduce you to Zac. So thanks for joining us today, Zac.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you tonight?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
You were born here, but you've been living in San Francisco and New York, and you just recently moved back. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just moved back in October.
And you just opened a new tattoo shop in Santa Fe.
On West Marcy Street, right downtown. We basically just started working on it right when we got here. And we're just sort of getting started now in January. So brand new.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you. It feels good to be home.
What brought you back?
Really was a plan for a long time. And then COVID and everything sort of led to it making sense and just wanting to get out of cities, I guess. So it just sort of made the plan happen a little bit quicker.
And then you learned to tattoo in Santa Fe.
Yeah, I learned under Mark Vigil at 4-Star Tattoo here. He's taught a lot of amazing tattooers here. So it's nice to come back and get to see him again too.
And the Santa Fe Reporter did a nice article about the new shop the other
Alex
day.
did.
So that was cool to see. And I love how they kind of just broke down the kind of community of tattooers in Santa Fe and kind of how a lot of those people were connected.
Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty small, pretty tight community.
One of the great things about Santa Fe. So what's the name of the shop?
It's called Shrine, and in the front of the shop is a jewelry store that my partner has opened called Ex Voto. It's like a joint effort. And then as part of Shrine, there's 4 artists working inside right now that we all sort of chipped in together to make this thing happen. So
was it the 20s in New York when tattooing was illegal?
It was illegal in New York. I don't know the exact date, but until the 90s at least. It's changing quicker than I think most people could imagine. And I think all of it's for the better. Some not so much, but most of it's going in a really good direction right now.
And how did you get into it initially?
Well, my dad got his first tattoo when he turned 50, and I went to the shop, I think, for part of it, or the consult, I don't remember, but obviously I was influenced by that. And then there's a gentleman here named Bill Weissman, and he was one of my dad's friends, and they both taught soccer to the kids. So Bill is a very amazing tattooer, was a very amazing tattooer here. And he sort of took Mark Vigil under his wing and Don Purnell under his wing out here and sort of taught them a little bit. I wouldn't say he didn't apprentice Mark, but he sort of mentored Mark, you could say. And then Bill did my sister's first tattoo when she turned 18. So I was just sort of seeing it from afar as a kid. And my dad was a college professor at College of Santa Fe here for a long time. And he ended up creating a lot of relationships with students. They run a photo gallery, and one of the students came and worked for them for a very long time doing matting and framing. His name was Mike Webb, and Mike now teaches at Monte del Sol Charter School of Photography. And Mike's an awesome, amazing person. And Mike's covered in tattoos. So sort of growing up around Mike a lot. In high school, I asked Mike if there was a way for me to do a mentorship type program with the tattoo shop in town. I didn't really know much about it, but we had these like mentorship things at school. It took a while, 4 or 5 months. One day Mark called me and was like, hey, you want to come in after school? You can come in like for a few hours, from 3 to 5 on Tuesdays. It was something like that. So it's sort of, that's how it started. And I showed up and Mark gave me a bunch of books to read, come back next week, read these. And that went on for a little. And then that just slowly evolved. And then it just became the only thing I thought about. And I never questioned it after that. There was never a doubt in my mind about that being what I wanted to do. It was like, yeah, I'll just do this. So if I can. And luckily Mark made that a possibility. So yeah.
Well, it can be kind of hard to get your foot in the door, as far as I understand it.
Very, very difficult. Now I really see how difficult, and I really got a pretty good taste of that when I got to New York too, because I just couldn't get a job anywhere. I don't react to disappointment in the same way a lot of people I know do. I get sort of fired up by being said no to. So getting turned down from 20 shops just made, I'm like, okay, I'll go home, make a new portfolio, work harder. I'll paint this, I'll do that. And it just made me work much harder, which I thought now I like that idea. I don't mind it. I think it's good to be told no, I guess sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's just a good way to react to no, that it kind of lit a fire under you and you were not getting, because I mean, a lot of people would just hear no, and then they would just give up.
Well, it doesn't feel good being told no. You're like, what did I do wrong? What's not good enough? I think it's pretty clear when I look back on it. I understand why they would say no.
So when you moved to New York, how long did it end up taking?
Probably about 5 months of no work, and then a lot of being turned down, and then a lot of I just went into a bong shop, like a smoke shop on St. Mark's. There's a lot of tattoo shops on the street. It's like Haight Street, sort of. I don't know if you're familiar with New York, but it's like a sort of not the nicest street, you could say, for this type of stuff. So there's 20 tattoo shops. So I went into one and I got a job, and then just started. I worked there for another, I don't really remember how long, maybe another 5-6 months, and then ended up getting a dream job offer, but it was only for a part-time thing, but I could only be there. That was the only job I was allowed to have. They made that clear. They were like, you can only work a few days a week, but you can't work anywhere else. So and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So yeah, and then that turned into more of a full, by the second week, they were like, you can just come in whenever you want. But it wasn't that busy at first, so it took another year or so to build up a little bit of a clientele. So
were you kind of relying on walk-in traffic at that point, kind of before you had the reputation of people?
Yeah, 100%. And luckily, I mean, there's a lot that led up to that opportunity falling into place, but luckily it was with people who were just amazing tattooers and very well-respected artists in the industry. So their runoff sort of supplied me with enough clientele to get by for a while. Yeah. So it was super lucky and fortunate position.
Before you left, you were at Kings Avenue?
Yeah. Before I left New York, I was at Kings Ave for about 4 years. And then I came from Saved, which was another shop, for about 4 years also. One of my boss at Saved started working at Kings Avenue. So it was sort of like a whole, everyone was friends. There were no bridges burnt or anything, still close with both shops, which was important to me.
And is that what brought you to San Francisco for a while as well? Because they have locations in both places. Were you actually kind of hopping back and forth?
There was a job opportunity with one of my favorite tattooers in the world, and I didn't like San Francisco, but I knew that I wanted to be there because I wanted to be able to work next to this person and get to learn from them and get to experience their artistic mind. Because to me, tattooing is all about learning, and it's all about understanding the human body and the form and how to apply something in a completely unique way. And Grime does it in a way I've never seen before, and he uses a different part of his brain that I've not seen many tattooers access. So it was just something I couldn't say no to. So I knew it was something worth trying. That's what led to that. And then I did go back and forth for the first year a little bit, and then just stayed in San Francisco.
That must have been an interesting kind of lifestyle, hopping from coast to coast.
It was weird. I had an apartment with roommates in New York and an apartment in San Francisco that just didn't really make sense. You know what I mean? The one
Yeah.
with roommates, I didn't really have to pay for when I wasn't there. It was sort of like when you show up, you pay some rent for those weeks. And then, so it wasn't like a financial burden, but both of those cities are also very pricey at that time, especially
Right.
that it was like, I was like, I'll just stay in San Francisco. Cause every time you move, it's like that same thing as that we were just saying in New York, you got to restart clientele, you have to start from the bottom. So luckily I did have some clients in San Francisco, but it was took a year or so to build up to a slightly normal pace again.
I've spent more time in San Francisco than I have in New York. I've been to New York a few times, but
Okay.
I'll admit I've admired your tattooing career through Instagram for a number of years. And there was a few
Thank
times
you.
I was in one of the two cities and I thought maybe I'll track down Zac, but I was usually there for business and it never happened. So, and then Afterlife Press so far produced 2 books, and there's a third?
As Afterlife Press, like the publishing company, we've released 2 volumes of a book called Afterlife. So We've released volume 1 and volume 2. And then we have a book called Could This Be Magic? Tattooing as Liberation Work, written by my friend Tamara Santibanez, and that's coming out very soon. And then we have a book of drawings by another artist named Chris O'Donnell, who was in one of the first books, and it's just an art book. And then we have volume 3 of Afterlife coming out. So those are like the 3 projects we're doing right now. And then we have a few more in the works, but they're not completely gathered yet.
Well, that is a whole process.
Yeah.
And I was doing a little research the other day, and the first 2 volumes of the books, as I understand it, included pretty extensive interviews. But as I understand it, some of your interviews technically, or the information that you sourced from, maybe carried on over the course of 3 days or so. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Some of them were, it's just, I mean, as you know, you said this was your 22nd one. So you start to learn a lot about how to ask people questions and how to get the answers you want. And then it's a big challenge of personality. So it's just this game of what makes this person comfortable, what makes this person excited, what do they want to talk about, like what lights them up. With the first interview for the book with Chris, we sat down, I asked him a few questions, and he talked for 3 hours, and that was it. It was a one and done. I was like, great, perfect. And then with some of the other ones, it just takes a little bit more. So a few days with the person, by the end of the second day, they're like, okay, let's chat about this other thing. Let's go get dinner. Let's do this. And like, you're able to just sort of get away more natural interview. Yeah. The best one we ever did it was me and 2 other people interview. So it was 3 of us asking questions to one person, and it'll be in the 3rd volume. And we were just sitting in his living room, and he was giving us some fruit and just hanging out, showing us paintings and talking for about 2 hours. And it was just way more relaxed, way more real, and just exciting. You know what I mean? It's just a different scenario. And that's what made me realize I really have to be there. I have to be with these people, and I have to be able to photograph them and photograph what they're doing. Like, we need content. So I need to look at their drawings. I need to see the process they go through when they're making a tattoo. I need to see the process beforehand. I need to understand why they're making certain decisions and be able to ask them that instead of just an email questionnaire or something. Like it has to be more of a conversation. But then I also realized conversations could be extremely boring. So what I did is I took those interviews back, sent them to this wonderful lady out here named Mary, who edited heavily the interviews and even rearranged them into a more readable structure. Then
Mm.
I looked at them, deleted stuff I felt uncomfortable, or I changed some of my questions to make it more straightforward because I was fumbling or saying fuck too much or something. So do that and then send them to the artist, let the artist look through it, they make changes, send it back to Mary, let her re-edit, put it in the book. Once it's in the design file, images are going in. When we're done, send it back to Mary for another round of editing. And this is all after, there's a man out here named David Skulkin, he was from Radius Books, and he's an amazing person and a fantastic book designer. And he's like overseeing all of this for us. So we'll show him the idea, explain it, and he'll be like, okay, you should set up the file like this, or do this, or try this. Then we'll go and do the whole thing, show him that, and he'll just make the changes. And he just makes it actually happen in a professional, good way. So yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that, any of it, without his advice and guidance and help with it. So
No, he's
yeah,
an amazing resource to have.
yeah, he's the best. He's awesome. So yeah, so that's like the process of the book and the interviews and how all of it gets put together. But it takes years, like each book takes a year or two or more. I don't know. Some of these have been taking, like the third book, for instance, is taking a very long time.
It's definitely a process. And
Yeah.
for one of the books, you actually went to London for a while. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been to, yes, New York, San Francisco, London, Japan. Luckily, I saw one of the guy we interviewed in Japan, we saw in London also. So it was like a double good thing. And then another two people in New York. So it was a lot of those 4 or 5 places was where it would all happened. And San Jose.
So in Japan, did you have to have translators?
Gentleman's name is Ichibe, and he works for a shop called Three Tides Tattoo, which is an amazing institution in Japan of tattooing. And he luckily speaks nearly perfect English. Like, he's incredible. And believe he learned English in Europe, maybe Switzerland. He's very close with another tattoo family out there. So he has a very like European British accent of English, but he speaks wonderful English. Yeah. So thankfully, no, we didn't need a translator because that'd be really hard.
I've done some portfolio reviews through the gallery and such.
Okay.
Japanese photographers who had brought translators, and it was a little tricky, just enough of a disconnect.
And I don't know if I don't know if we can understand the full meaning sometimes. I think because the second book, Horitomo was the artist in it, and he speaks mostly Japanese. So we had Taki, who owns State of Grace out there. His mom was there to translate for us because she's a really amazing translator and really understands the Japanese language in a way where she would be able to express it in English better. But we had her and Taki sort of sitting there for all of the interviews. So Horitomo would say a sentence, and then Taki and his mom would talk about it for like 2 minutes and then translate it. But we ended up, it took a little bit of a level away from the conversational aspect, but you got way more heartfelt, perfectly said answers. There was no question because they made sure exactly what he was saying before they told you. So there's not a lot of back and forth. It was more like, this is what this is.
I was just thinking of that process of just also in the multi-day interview, working as a gallerist, a lot of things I've learned about artists that are probably the most interesting things that I've learned about them have been over dinner conversations or something like that. It's not, during a formal lecture.
Exactly, when you're comfortable.
Exactly. Back to the books. So the first 2 editions, they're sold out completely, which is great.
Yeah, it is great.
Bookmaking is a lot of work. You have to be very tenacious. Distribution, that's the huge last hurdle. How did you guys go about distribution?
Well, I didn't. I just said we'd do it ourselves. David said there was an awesome company in Rio Rancho, New Mexico that does a fulfillment service. So we called them. I asked them if, how much it would be to pack and ship the books and stuff like that and go through the orders. And they were like, yeah, no problem. We can do it. And it's very also supporting local business. And that was important to me. And then my boss at Kings Ave has a tattoo supply company in Europe with another man named Henning. And I offered them a couple hundred books that they could carry for European sales, because then it would help us not have to ship overseas as much. So I made like that deal for distribution for the first 2 books, and then the other ones were just shipped there, and we just built our own website for it. There's a lot of people that make books about tattooing that aren't tattooers, and there's a lot of things in the tattoo industry that are exploitive of the artists involved and the people tattooing. There's a lot of companies that come in and corporations that come in and they see that it's a financially stable industry, and they want to, they just want to come in like any big corporation would. So I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to do it myself and just, find the right people to help with the projects and keep it really small and people I know, and not have to outsource to anyone that we didn't have to, so tried to keep it as simple as possible. But the tattoo industry is a weird bubble. So I don't think it'd be very easy to sell out, for instance, photography books. It's a very different market, and tattooers don't get a lot of information. You'd think they would from Instagram and all these social media and blogs and all this stuff, but there's not a lot of quality things people really want. So it's very like inclusive in that way. So like a book comes out on tattooing and people get usually sort of excited, which is awesome, because then it ends up taking care of its own and allows it to make the next one too.
I mean, just getting it in front of the right audience.
Very tricky, but that's what social media is. It's free advertising, and everyone, when you get something, people like to share that. And I didn't realize any of this when we made the book. I just was hoping we'd make enough to pay for the printing. That was the only goal, as long as we could make what we put in back, I'd be super stoked. But what I didn't realize is that every person who got the book would then take a picture of it and post it. And then that turns into 200 people sharing part of the tattoo community also. Because like, that's the one thing that I don't know if a lot of other communities have, but if someone in the industry gets sick, cancer, bike accident, someone passes away, it's like someone gets evicted, someone needs money to open a new shop and they're by themselves and maybe there's 1,000 different things, and the industry stands up for all of these things and donates, and it's really rare. I don't see that in a lot of things, but like we really take care of each other for the people that know each other, which is it's big, but it's also small, and there's a lot of sub communities in it. But I don't know a lot of other places that like are willing to do that to the extent of these things, because there is something with tattooing. If you do a fundraiser and you end up making a bunch of money for a charity or an organization or a fire or whatever it is, and you realize like this isn't a little bit of money, this is a lot of money. And if you got 100 shops across the world to do it, it would be a massive amount of donation. So like you could make actual difference with this offering. So what are you going to do with that? That's the thing. And it leads back to the books, as silly as like posting a picture of something you bought is, and sort of superficial and whatever, but it also is showing support and taking care of people that have been nice to you, or you've cared about, or you've helped them when they needed help. It's pretty amazing, I think.
What was it that really made you want to make the books?
Yeah, it was 100% not about money. The main reason to make it for me was that I wasn't seeing or reading anything that I wanted to see or read in the industry. And when I started and go back to the day I walked into 4 Star and Mark giving me those books, he gave me, I'm sure you know Ed Hardy because of clothing and everything, but also he's a very
He's a
prolific
person. Yeah.
tattooer. He made these books called Tattoo Time, and they're these little issues. They're magazine style. There's 5 of them. And that was what Mark gave me the first day I walked in. And it was sort of like Ed focused each one on a subject. It was like art from the heart was one, or like, you know, there was like a sea one. There was just new tribalism. You know, there were like these 5 different things he chose, and he sort of did interviews with the artist, showed pictures, and had other people write sections. And it was just these super informative things. And you read them and you get this feeling of any artist. You get a feeling of inspiration. You get a feeling of like, whoa, what is this? This is crazy. This is something I'm not used to. You know, I want to know more. There, when you're starting out, you're just so excited. You know, every magazine, every book that comes out, you want to read it. You want to see what these other people are thinking. And then one day, I don't know if I got super jaded and I was like, I just don't care. I'm not inspired by any of this stuff I'm seeing or reading now. Or if the industry got oversaturated, I don't know which one it was, but something happened. And I was like, well, what I want to see, what I want to feel from like a tattoo time type thing isn't happening. No one's making it. So I'm going to make it because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to interview anyone, but I know what I want to know. And I'm assuming if I have questions to my heroes, other people would want to know the same thing. So that was the honest. It was just because I wanted to read it. That was really the only reason I wanted to make it.
I love that. Yeah. Speaking of Ed Hardy, I had Jen Lee from Ed Hardy's Tattoo City.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
know Jen. She's great.
so actually, the episode I uploaded last Sunday is Jen. So
Oh cool.
check out
That's
Jen
awesome.
on
Yeah,
there. Yes.
Jen's rad.
Yeah. No, she's great.
Bill Weissman, going back to who showed Mark, Bill went to the Art Institute in San Francisco with Ed, and they were very close. So, yeah, I know Suze, who is at Double Take. That was Bill's wife, and you know she's still has a lot of this old tattoo memorabilia, which is just the coolest thing ever. So
I did not go to the San Francisco Institute of Art, but the Photo Alliance has a portfolio review that they have done out there for the past 15 years or so, and they've brought me out there for I think like 14 years in a row to review different photographers'
that's
portfolios.
awesome.
So I've never been in San Francisco for more than 2-3 days, but it's kind of has a I don't know, kind of feels like a second home in a sense, or I don't know.
That's
I didn't
cool.
go to the Art Institute, but
You
uh,
go there enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So outside of tattooing, I found online you sell prints of your paintings and drawings, but I think I also found some monotypes as well.
When I learned monotypes was in my friend's bedroom in New York. So I just don't have the press or anything. But yeah,
Sure.
I love those, and I go in like cycles of painting a lot and then not painting for months. So I'm in a not painting for months cycle right now, but soon enough we'll get back on it. So
Well, and it's a little tricky too when you're tattooing, you're kind of constantly drawing
yeah,
for the tattoos.
and then when you're busy with tattooing, it's a lot of prep work. I'm sure as you've heard from other people, yeah, it's just a lot of homework. Doesn't leave me personally wanting to like do more. I'm just like, all right, that's it for today.
Right.
I'm gonna relax now or read or something. Or movies. I love
Yeah.
movies. So
I mean, there's only so much time in the day, and at a certain point, you are just ready to kind of unplug and chill out.
yeah.
And I think that's necessary just in terms of balance in.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's important to not push it when you're not feeling
So
it. So
in your tattooing, it seems like you do a fair amount of hands and necks and large scale pieces. I mean, you're kind of known for that a little bit. Is that
I don't know. I get
not at
that would
all?
be cool to be known for that. But I do a lot of spider webs. I know people like that, and a lot of little snakes. So
Mhm.
it's a huge honor for people to trust you with things like their hands and their neck. So I'm very thankful that people care that much to come to me for that.
Well, I guess maybe that's where I'm getting that from. Looking at photographs of a lot of the tattoos you've done, there are a fair number of those types of body parts,
Yeah,
which I agree that that is a huge compliment. I don't know, your hands. People see your hands every day, so
yeah,
that's a serious commitment.
big commitment. I remember the first hand I ever did. I was really nervous and was scared to do it, and my coworker was like, "Just pretend you've done 1,000 before." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay." He's like, "Just think of it like that, and it'll be fine." And I was like, "Okay, that's easy enough, I guess." And then you just sort of go for it. And you hit a point where you stop getting nervous about doing a tattoo, and
Mhm.
then you're able to relax. I think that's when tattoos start to come out a little bit better for you, but that's 10 years in, 8 years in, something like that for me.
Or I'd heard somewhere that a lot of tattooers had said kind of the 10-year mark was kind of significant.
That was told to me also. I was told that when you hit 10 years, that's when you can actually start tattooing. Like that's when you actually can really focus on the other aspects of tattooing in terms of drawing, placement, things like that. Because I think why people put so much emphasis on a 10-year mark is that it does take about 10 years of tattooing almost 5 days a week for 10 years to understand how to put a tattoo on, how to apply a tattoo to any part of the body
Mhm.
without ever worrying. And that's that same thing I just said, without getting nervous, like, oh, am I going to ruin this? Am I going to fuck this up? Am I going to do this? So I'd say when I hit, it was around 10 years. And I'm not saying I stopped caring, as in I don't care what I'm doing, but I didn't care anymore about, there's, I don't get worried ever. It just doesn't, I'm like, I might get a little anxious about a back piece or something like that, just in terms of trying to fit the stencil on or make a crazy stencil. It takes forever. I don't like that process. Some people are great at it. Those types of things I'll get nervous about, but I'm not nervous about if I can do it. So it's really, it's like, it's to where you can do something without thinking. I guess that's what it is. So it's like driving a stick shift in a car or playing tennis or whatever it is, to where like you don't have to think about where you want the ball to go, about where you want the car to go, or what gear you have to be in a manual car. It's just straightforward, no thought necessary.
So I am curious, of all of the tattoos that you've gotten over the years, do you have a favorite? Or is there one that's particularly meaningful?
I have a lot that would mean something to me, but I did like a weird experiment with most of my tattoos where there's this old painter. His name's Otto Marcius van Schreck, I think. It's
Mhm.
German. I don't really know how to pronounce it, so apologies. But he does naturalistic still lifes. So he would do like a still life in nature with, it wasn't a still life sitting on a table exactly, but it was more like a still life of a forest floor. So it's a zoomed in painting with the frogs and mushrooms and snails and snakes and butterflies and thorns, trees, ferns, just like these salamander. I don't know, it's these really dark, amazing paintings. And I'm very drawn to a lot of European art and painting from Renaissance period on. I don't know. It's just it's always been. So the still life is something I really connect with on so many levels, even not just the naturalistic still lifes, but other ones too. So what I did is I printed out a few of these paintings that I liked that were still lifes, and I sent them to my old boss at King's Ave, who helped me get my job at Saved and everything. His name's Mike Rubendahl, and I sent him these drawings, and I said I want a sleeve, so my whole left arm based on this, and he does mostly Japanese style tattooing, so very not his thing, but he was like, okay, sure. So he did it, and then my boss then at Saved, this guy Chris O'Donnell that I mentioned from the books, gave him the same exact paintings to do my back. So from the back of my neck to the back of my knees all the way, and, base it off these paintings. And then Grime, the guy I went to work in San Francisco with, I gave him the same paintings to work off of for my right arm. But Grime's the only one I told what I was doing. So Chris and Mike, they obviously knew I liked these images, but they didn't understand, because what I was trying to understand as a tattooer is representation of imagery and translation of imagery. So if someone brings you a rose drawing to get tattooed, you're going to do a tracing of this rose and you're going to simplify it to make it tattooable. So what I was trying to understand is how these three artists that I looked up to took these paintings that would not work on a body at all, and then blend that and simplify, translate it onto the skin, and then add their element to it and make it work. So most of my body is an experiment in interpretation, you could say. It's a big learning process, and I still look at them every day and learn something new all the time from the way they approached it.
I love that story.
It is just one big tattoo, because they all blend together. They all connected it, to each other. So, and these guys were all friends, so that was sort of nice because they got to sort of work. They saw what each other did and tied that in their way they found appropriate. So,
being in the business, you have a lot of opportunities to get tattooed by a lot of people that the outside world would not necessarily.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Even though I did wait 4 or 5 years to get tattooed by Grime the first time. And then I waited almost 2 years to get tattooed by Mike. So at those I didn't know them at those points.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So those were like the introduction, and then that did lead to friendship. And
is there somebody that you're hoping to aspire to get tattooed by someday?
At the moment, I don't want to get tattooed at all. But if I could there's still so many artists I would love to get work from. Regino Gonzalez, he's one of my favorites of all time. And then there's a gentleman named Mike Roper, who is a legend, and Philip Liu. There's a lot of people I would really love to get some stuff from. And I still haven't gotten tattooed from any of my new coworkers at the shop here yet either. And I love all of their work. So that will probably happen before any of the other stuff. But yeah, they're all amazing. So actually, that's not true. John has tattooed me, but the other two, Marie and Aron, have not. So.
You'd mentioned earlier that you were super into movies. Do you have a favorite movie of all time, or favorite movie recently?
We've been watching a lot of Korean films right now. I live with my partner Megan, and then with another couple, John Sultana, who works at Shrine, and his wife Meg, who's a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. The four of us vote basically every night and then watch a movie. But we've been on this Korean kick, so we watched this movie called The Wailing. It's really interesting. I don't know.
How are you finding these particular movies?
People recommend, and then I get super obsessive about a director or a writer, and I'll be like, oh, I just want to see everything this dude did or this woman did, just to be like, let me see what their mind is, because I'll watch stupid movies every now and then, but I can't really also watch movies once. I have to watch them a few times, because I watch it once just to understand what they're going for. And then if I like the general feel, then I'll watch it again more to understand the story or the direction or how they're framing stuff. And I think a lot of that ties back to my love of like old Japanese and Italian cinema. I get like obsessive about movies. I also love animation stuff. So yeah, because it inspires me to, I don't know what it inspires me, but because it's not like I make art based off of it, but it does help me feel more excited to potentially paint or draw something different with a tattoo or something.
So is there maybe a favorite director that you're into?
In terms of American directors, I like Paul Thomas Anderson a lot because I like There Will Be Blood, and I like Boogie Nights a lot. I think those are like masterpiece films. I know I'm a huge nerd, so most all science fiction and fantasy stuff I do love. So I watch a lot of that. I like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, the band. So Nick Cave wrote a few movies. We just watched one of those again for me, and I like the idea of these people creating worlds that go beyond one movie. So like I think that's why I like Paul Thomas Anderson, for instance, because he'll use a lot of the same actors in a lot of the same movies. I mean, a lot of different movies, a lot of the same actors. And I like the idea of that. It, to me, that's a world expanding idea in terms of this person. You're seeing them write a book that we're watching on film, in terms of like there's different books with the same character. There's different scenarios, there's different worlds, there's different stuff, but you're having these actors play these varying roles. And to me, it's like, okay, this person's created this fictitious world, and maybe it's just a little bit off. Maybe it's a parallel universe from ours, but it's just, to me, I just like that. I like seeing that because it also shows a range of acting skills too. So
Well, no,
yeah,
I mean,
what do you like?
the Coen brothers kind of just popped
Mm-hmm.
into my mind.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, my first ever favorite movie of all time was Labyrinth with David
Oh,
Bowie.
this is a
So
great movie.
that one's kind of key.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that one a lot. That I liked Princess Bride a lot as a kid too. So
And
yeah,
Princess Bride as well.
there's something that you lose as an adult with repetition. And when I was just having this conversation the other day also about movies, because there were a few movies, Princess Bride being one of them, and then one of the Indiana Jones, I don't remember which one, maybe the one with Sean Connery, and then this movie called The Castle of Cagliostro, which is like Miyazaki, who's an anime director, Japanese animation director. It's his first movie, but he didn't write it. It's this like a thief story. But those three movies, there were days where I had gotten sick as a kid or something, and I think I watched them 2 or 3 times each in one day on separate days. But be like, oh, I'm gonna watch The Princess Bride 3 times today, because there's something as a child that like there's a you're I don't know, maybe it's because you're learning your emotions and you're feeling something by watching these. And then when I think back on it and I think about a kid myself watch like sitting in front of a TV for 3 movies, it makes me super sad. Obviously, it doesn't sound like a very like good way to spend a day, but then knowing what I got out of it, or like, oh, you understood so much more about whatever lesson they're trying to teach you, whatever thing is trying to be expressed by that filmmaker, whatever adventure these people are going on, that like is so magical and mind expanding that you just want to experience it again. So you do it again, then you do it again. And yeah, I think when you're a little kid too, like my mom would read me books, and like we read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and Stuart Little, like these things. And I always want to do it again, okay, let's read The Hobbit again, or let's do this. And you see that a lot. You see that repetition. Now I have a niece and 2 nieces, but I see my sister's daughter the same thing. She'll talk about something she just watched, and then it's just like an obsession, and I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens to it, because you don't do that now. You're not going to do that. You're not going to watch the same movie 3 times because there's 1,000 options now. They're all right at your fingertips. And why would you watch it twice? I don't know.
I have a small DVD collection, and the reason you would buy it is you're going to watch it again. So I don't know. I think sometimes there's something you can get from watching something multiple times, or for whatever reason you just feel compelled, but you're not going to watch it concurrently as maybe you did when you were a kid.
But I wish you would. I wish we would.
Yeah, I'm going to take a week off, and I'm just going to binge all of the Coen Brothers movies ever.
Exactly.
So another one of the questions I like to ask is about things that you might collect.
Books,
What kind of books?
art books, comic books, tattoo books, anything with pictures for reference for tattooing. It's all basically comes back to tattooing. That's the main thing that I would collect, even though I've slowed down. Like I don't have a lot of collections right now. I could say that I have a lot of books that I've collected over the last 20 years, but it's very, now I'm very like picky. I collect art that's from friends, or those are probably the two main things that I put time or money or energy into.
Well, I think the thing about books, once you have a significant book collection, you kind of have to slow it down a little bit because it takes up space and it's heavy. And so
And
you just,
moving sucks.
and yes, and when you move, then you really realize how many books you have. So that's when you become a little more, you just put a little more thought into each book that,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But books are like, I love books. First love, you could say. It's definitely something I like. So hence making books, I'm
And
sure.
books, yes.
Yeah.
Comes full circle.
Exactly.
So in terms of describing your tattooing style to someone that might not be familiar with it, how would you describe that?
Black and gray tattooing.
If you could only tattoo the image for the rest of your life, if they said, okay, Zac, this is all you tattoo moving forward, and not that that's going to happen, do you know what you would pick?
That's a tricky question, because it's like, do you want to just cop out and say, okay, I'll choose spider webs because it would pay the bills and they look cool? So I would be tempted to say that, but it would be extremely unfulfilling.
Right. Maybe you just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, maybe I would quit,
Yeah.
honestly. But I mean, snakes and flowers and skulls, any one of those three, it'd probably be okay with for the rest of my life. If I had to just choose one, if someone said you're just doing flowers or you're just doing a snake or a skull, I'd be like, okay, I can do it, because you'd learn more every time through repetition.
Seems like the way you tattoo snakes is a little bit, um, there's something unique about it.
I mean, I don't think anything I do is unique, but I appreciate that you think that it's all from somewhere. You know what I mean? It's all, so like I'll do the snakes made of just little dots with no outline, and like a gradation of gray.
Mm-hmm.
People get them a lot on their necks or on their hand or wherever. They're good to fill in between spaces. They're like a great filler tattoo. And those are just from looking at old prints of Indian deities, because Shiva always had a snake wrapped around the neck. And a lot of these old like poster art things would depict the snakes with just made of these little circles. And I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's so simplified for a tattoo. So tracing other people's snakes from learning, and then just learning the trick over and over and be like, okay, now I can stretch it a little bit. Now I can look at a real snake and trace that. And then there's a lot of tracing in tattooing. It's a lot of like understanding the movement of your hand over 1,000 repetitions of something. And then you're like, okay, no more reference. I'm just going to draw it now from memory. And that's when your style starts to come out. If you think they look unique, I'm sure they look like my hand did it, but it all is like, it's like 1,000 things in a blender, basically. So,
Well, sure. I mean, it all comes from somewhere and has been done at a certain time. I think it's just in terms of art making, whatever that may be, doing it in a certain way that has kind of a distinctive style to it. It doesn't look like just anybody. Well, obviously not anybody could have done it, but you kind of can recognize that style with so and so artist.
yeah, no, I'll do the same thing. I can look at something and be like, oh, that's that person, or that's, get an eye for it.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing too. Drawing from the mind versus reference is
Mhm.
that, like we're talking about the snakes. Do Do you often, when you're sketching them up for clients, do they often just kind of come from your memory at this point?
Yeah, it completely depends what kind of snake or like where on the body. If it's fitting between other tattoos or something like that, then I'll just draw it on with a marker, no reference. So that's easy because I know what it is. It doesn't have a lot of boundaries to break at that point. But if you're doing like a sleeve or a back piece and someone wants a big snake, there's like infinite possibilities of tracing or not tracing or looking at that person's body, the shapes that their body's giving you, and how to accentuate the good parts and give like the best possible impact of an image. How strong can you make it? And how can you use someone's body to do it? Because it's not flat. It's a 3D thing. You know, you can draw a cool snake on a piece of paper, but sign of a good tattooer is someone that would know how to translate that to a three-dimensional object in a really unique and powerful way.
When you sketch up designs, are you sketching on paper or are you using an iPad?
I now use the iPad for most everything because a few years ago I was traveling a lot and doing a lot of conventions and a lot of guest spots around the world, and having tracing paper and tape and brush pens and markers and just so much shit. Pencil, I was just like an eraser. That was just like, you know what? I went on a trip to San Francisco before I moved there, and I was like, I'm only bringing the iPad. I'm gonna only do this so that I can simplify this, save paper,
Right.
not just not waste as much, and just understand how to use this thing because the potential is extraordinary, and the way you can warp and change a design to fit someone like perfectly is awesome. There is something I really miss about paper for sure. Nothing's the same as that, but I'm pretty much iPad now. It's actually helped me paint more because now painting gets to feel like art instead of like when I work on paper now, it's like for a purpose. It's not always just to sketch and draw, but I do wish it was a practice I still had. Maybe I'll start again.
Well, I love that. I mean, I always say, look, the right tool for the right process. But I kind of like that differentiation between if you're drawing on the iPad, it's maybe for a tattoo design, and but
Yeah.
if you decide to break out a piece of paper, that's when you're just making art for you, whatever you want to do. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
that's
don't think of tattooing of the iPad as art. You know, it's like I'm like this is just whatever. But then I see some friends make some paintings on the iPad or prints, and I'm like, wow, that makes me want to now try that, see what's possible in those digital realms.
well. I really appreciate you joining us tonight,
Yeah,
Zac. Do you have any shout outs or plugs?
the shop's the main thing. Getting, it's I've never had a shop before. I've never done this, and I want Aron Dubois and John Sultana and Marie Sena to be the happiest and best they can ever be. So they're the people I want to shout out because I want them to feel good. And of course, Andrew Semelli, who I grew up with here, I don't know if you know him, but he's the manager now of the shop and he's running everything and he's like the best ever. So it's if it can bring a little bit of attention to those guys, it would be really cool.
Santa Fe's, yeah, we're happy to have you back, and I look forward to coming out and checking out the shop.
Well,
But
come see us. Yeah.
I will, and it was great talking to you, Zac,
Yeah.
and stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah,
me. It means a lot that you'd even want to talk. So it's really cool. Thank you so much.
no, super appreciate you for joining, and have a great night, and we shall talk soon.
Okay. Sounds great. You too.
All right, take care.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for watching episode 22 of Art in the Raw with Zac Scheinbaum. If you've enjoyed the conversation, please keep the inspiration going. Do us a solid. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please drop them down in the comments. We will do our best to answer them, or perhaps visit those questions in future episodes. Have a good night.